Good morning, everyone. I'm Annalyn Maglasang, and I'll tackle the Unit 3, Part 1, the developmental theories and other relevant theories. It consists Module 5 to 10, the Freud psychoanalytic theory, the Piaget stages of cognitive development, Erikson's psychosocial theory of development, Kohlberg's stages of moral development, Vygotsky's social cultural theory, and the Bronfenbrenner's ecological theory. First, let's tackle the Freud psychoanalytic theory. It consists of the oral stage, the anal stage, phallic stage, latency stage, and genital stage. The oral stage starts in the mouth and focuses on oral pleasures like sucking. The anal stage, 18 months to 3 years, the child's focus of pleasure in this stage is the anus. The phallic stage, the pleasure or erogenous zone is genital. The latency stage, age 6 to puberty. During this stage, sexual urges remain repressed. Children's focus is the acquisition of physical and academic skills. The genital stage or the puberty onwards, a fifth stage of psychosexual development begins at the start of puberty when sexual urges. Sigmund Freud, a founder of psychoanalysis, proposed the first complete theory of personality and a person's thoughts and behaviors. According to Freud, there are three components of personality structures: the ID, the ego, and the superego. First is the ID. It plays a vital role in one's personality because as a baby, it works so that the baby's essential needs are met. Example of ID is when the child is uncomfortable, in pain, or the ID speaks up until his or her needs are met. Another example of ID is when a baby is hungry, the ID wants food or milk, so they will cry. Or when the child needs to be changed, the ID cries. Nothing else matters to the ID except the satisfaction of its own needs. It is not oriented towards considering reality nor the needs of others. When the ID wants something, it wants it now and it wants it fast. The second is the ego. As the baby turns into a toddler and then into a preschooler, he or she relates more with the environment. The ego slowly begins to emerge. Ego operates using the reality principle. It is aware that others also have needs to be met. It is practical because it knows the being impulsive or selfish can result to negative circumstances. So, it reasons and considers the best response to situations. Although it functions to help the ID meet its needs, it always takes into account the reality of the situation. That is the ego. The third one is the superego. It develops near the end of the preschool years, and it embodies a person's moral aspects. Superego is likened to conscience because it exerts influence on what one considers right or wrong. According to Freud, a well-adjusted person is one who has strong ego, who can help satisfy the needs of the ID without going against the superego, while maintaining the person's sense of what is logical, practical, and real. Of course, it is not easy for the ego to do all that and strike a balance. If the ID exerted too much power over the ego, the person becomes too impulsive and pleasure-seeking behavior takes over one's life. On the opposite direction, one may find the superego so strong that the ego is overpowered. The person becomes too harsh and judgmental to himself and other actions. The person's best effort to be good may still fall short of the superego's expectation. It simplifies as this. The ability of learner to be well adjusted is largely influenced by how the learner was brought up. And Freud believed that the personality of an individual is formed early during the childhood years. Freud has the topographical model. It consists the unconscious, the conscious, and the subconscious. First, let's tackle the unconscious. Unconscious, Freud said that most what we go through in our lives, emotions, beliefs, feelings, and impulses deep within are not available to us at a conscious level. Freud believed that most of what influences us is our unconscious. Example, the Oedipus and the Electra complex were both buried down into the unconscious out of our awareness due to the extreme anxiety they caused. While these complexes are in our unconscious, they still influence of thinking, feeling, and doing in perhaps dramatic ways. Next is the conscious. Freud also said that all that we are aware of is stored in our conscious mind. Our conscious minds only comprises a very small part of who we are, so that in our everyday life, we are only aware of a very small detail and mix up our personality. Most of what we are is hidden and out of our reach. The third one is the conscious. Conscious is the part of us that we can reach if prompted, but is not an active conscious. It's right below the surface but still hidden somewhat unless we search for it. Information such as our telephone number, some childhood memories, or the name of your best childhood friend is stored in the preconscious. Because the unconscious is so huge, and because we are only aware of the very small conscious at any given time, Freud used the analogy of the iceberg to illustrate it. Interesting facts about the subconscious mind. It records everything, always alert and awake. It controls 95% of our lives. It is built on habituation. It is million times powerful than conscious mind. Jean Piaget. The Module 6, the Piaget stages of cognitive development. According to him, the principal goal of education is to create men who are capable of doing new things, not simply of repeating what other generations have done, men who are creative, inventive, and discoverers. Jean Piaget's cognitive theory of development is truly a classic in the field of educational psychology. This theory fueled under researches and theories of development and learning. Its focus is on how individuals construct knowledge. The cognitive development, a truly classic field of this theory fueled other researches and theories of development and focus on how individuals construct knowledge. Jean Piaget's basic cognitive consists of schema, assimilation, accommodation, equilibration, which is consists of the cognitive disequilibrium. First is the schema. Schema, it refers to the cognitive structures by which individuals intellectually adapt to and organize their environment. An individual's way to understand or create meaning about a thing or experience. The assimilation is a process of fitting a new experience into an existing or previously created cognitive structure or schema. The accommodation is the process of creating a new schema. If the same child now sees another animal that looks a little bit like a dog but somehow different. The equilibration, Piaget believed that the people have the natural need to understand how the world works and to find order, structure, and predictability in their life. The cognitive disequilibrium is when our experiences do not match our schemata or plural of schema or cognitive structures. Piaget's stages of cognitive development. Stage 1 is the sensory motor stage. Sensory motor stage is when a child who is initially reflexive in grasping, sucking, and reaching becomes more organized in his movement and activity. The object permanence, the ability of the child to know what an object still exists even when out of sight. The stage 2 is the pre-operational stage. This stage covers from about 2 to 7 years old, roughly corresponding to the preschool years. Intelligence on the stage is intuitive in nature. The symbolic function, the ability to represent something else. The egocentrism, the tendency of the child to only see his point of view and to assume that everyone also has its same view. The child cannot take the perspective of others. The irreversibility is the pre-operational children still have the inability to reverse their thinking. The animism is the tendency of children to attribute human-like traits or characteristics to inanimate objects. The transductive reasoning refers to the pre-operational child's type of reasoning that is neither inductive nor deductive. Stage 3, concrete operational stage. This stage is characterized by the ability of the child to think logically but only in terms of concrete objects. This covers approximately the ages between 8 to 11 years or the elementary school years. It consists of decentering. Decentering refers to the ability of the child to perceive the different features of objects and situations. This allows the child to be more logical when dealing with concrete objects and situations. The reversibility. During the stage of concrete operation, the child can now follow that certain operations can be done in reverse. The conservation, this is the ability to know that certain properties of object like number, mass, volume, or area do not change even if there is a change in appearance. Next is the seriation. This refers to the ability to arrange things in a series based on one dimension such as weight, volume, or size. Stage 4, the formal operational stage. It covering ages between 12 and 15 years. Thinking becomes more logical. They can now solve abstract problems and can hypothesize. First is the hypothetical reasoning. This is the ability to come up with different hypotheses about a problem and to gather and weigh data in order to make a final decision or judgment. The analogical reasoning, the ability to perceive the relationship in one instance and then use that relationship to narrow down possible answers in another similar situation or problem. The deductive reasoning, the ability to think logically by applying a general rule to a particular instant or situation. And these are the findings of Piaget's comprehensive theory. Children will provide different explanation of reality at different stages of cognitive development. Second, cognitive development is facilitated by providing activities that engage learners and require adaptation. Example is the assimilation and accommodation. 3 is learning materials and activities should involve the appropriate level of motor or mental operation for child of given age. Next is the use teaching method that actively involves student and present challenges. Next is the module 7, the Erikson Psycho-Social Theory of Development. Erik Erikson said that healthy children will not fear life if their elders have integrity enough not to fear death. Psychosocial, derived from two source words psychological, root word of psycho relating to the mind, brain, personality, and social, external relationship and environment. The 8 psychosocial stages of development according to Erik Erikson. First, stage 1, the psychosocial crisis. This is crisis versus mistrust. The maladaptation, malignancy. What is maladaptation? Maladaptation is the failure to adjust adequately or appropriately to the environment or situation. So the 8 social stages, according to Erik Erikson, the stage 1 belongs to maladaptation, virtue, and the psychosocial crisis. First is the maladaptation or malignancy. It doesn't near the parents have to be perfect. In fact, parents who are overly protective of the child, who are there to minute the first cry comes out, must lead the child into maladaptive tendency, which Erikson calls sensory maladjustment. The virtue of this stage 1 is if the proper balance is achieved, the child will develop the virtue of hope, the strong belief that even when things are not going well, they will work out well in the end. The stage 2, the stage 2. The stage of psychosocial crisis is early childhood. The task is to achieve a degree of autonomy while minimizing shame and doubt. In this stage, the parents should not discourage the child, but neither should they push. 2 ways to lead children to shame and doubt. If you give children unrestricted freedom and no sense of limit, or if you try to help children do what they should learn to do for themselves, you will also give them the impression that they are not good for much. The maladaptation and the malignancy is, nevertheless, a little shame and doubt is not only inevitable, but beneficial. Without it, you will develop the maladaptive tendency. Erikson calls it impulsiveness, a sort of shameless willfulness that leads you in later childhood and leads you to jump into things. Impulsiveness, a sort of shameless willfulness that leads you in later childhood and adulthood to jump into things without proper consideration of your abilities. And the virtue of stage 2 is if you get the proper positive balance of autonomy and shame and doubt, you will develop the virtue of willpower or determination. The stage 3, the psychosocial crisis. The task is to learn initiative. Without too much guilt, initiative means a positive response to the world's challenges, taking on responsibilities, learning new skills, feeling purposeful. The maladaptation or the malignancy is that too much initiative and too guilt means a maladaptive tendency. Erikson calls it ruthless. To be ruthless is the heartless or unfeeling or be without mercy. The extreme form of ruthlessness is sociopathy. The virtue of stage 3 is that a good balance leads to the psychosocial strength of purpose. It's better to use the word courage as it is the capacity or action despite a clear understanding of your limitation and past feelings. The stage 4, the psychosocial crisis. It is the school age stage when the child is from about 6 to 12. The task is to develop a capacity for industry while avoiding an excessive sense of inferiority. Children must tame the imagination and dedicate themselves to education and to learning the social skills their society requires of them. Additional sources of inferiority Erection mentioned are racism, sexism, and other forms of discrimination. The maladaptation malignancy of stage 4 is that too much industry leads to maladaptive tendency called narrow virtuosity. We see this in children who aren't allowed to be children, the ones that parents or teachers push into one area of competence without allowing the development of broader interests. The virtue of stage 4 is that a happier thing is to develop the right balance of industry and inferiority. That is mostly industry with just a touch of inferiority to keep us sensible, humble. Then we have the virtue called competency. The stage 5, the psychosocial crisis. At stage 5, it consists the psychological crisis, the adolescence, beginning the puberty and ending around 18 to 20 years. The task during adolescence is to achieve ego identity and avoid role confusion. When an adolescent is confronted by role confusion, Erickson says he or she is suffering from an identity crisis. And the common question adolescents in our society ask is a straightforward question of identity is, who am I? Too much ego identity where a person is so involved in a particular rule in particular society or subculture that there is no room left for tolerance. And Erickson called them maladaptive tendency the fanaticism. A fanatic believes that his way is the only way, while the repudiation, it is the lack of identity. To repudiate is to reject. Some adolescents prefer to go to groups that go against the norms to form their identity. And at the end, if they may become involved in destructive activities such as drugs and alcohol. The virtue of stage 5 is that if successfully negotiates the stage, you will have the virtue which Erickson called the fidelity. Fidelity means loyalty, the ability to live by society's standards despite their imperfections and incompleteness and inconsistencies. Fidelity means that you have found a place in that community, a place that will allow you to contribute. The stage 6, the psychosocial crisis, a young adult which lasts from about 18 to 30 years. These ages in the adult stages are much fuzzier than the childhood stages and people may differ dramatically. The task is to achieve some degree of intimacy as opposed to remaining of isolation. Intimacy is the ability to be close to others as a lover, a friend, and as a participant in society. You have a clear sense of who you are. You no longer need to fear losing yourself as many adolescents do. The fear of commitment some people seem to exhibit is an example of immaturity in this stage. The maladaptation in this stage, Erickson calls the maladaptive form promiscuity, referring particularly to form tendency to become intimate, to freely, to easily, and without any depth to your intimacy. This can be true of your relationship with friends and neighbors, and your whole community as well as with lovers. Consists of exclusion, a malignancy that refers to the tendency to isolate oneself from love, friendship, and community, and to develop a certain hatefulness in a compensation for one's loneliness. The stage 6 virtue is if you successfully negotiate this stage, You will instead carry with you for the rest of your life the virtue of psychosocial strength Erikson called love. Love. Love in the context of his theory means that being able to put aside differences and antagonism through mutuality of devotion. It includes not only the love we find in a good marriage, but the love between friends and the love of one's neighbor, so co-worker and compatriot as well. Okay. The stage 7, the psychosocial crisis in this stage is middle adulthood. It would include the periods during which we are actively involved in raising children. The task is to cultivate the proper balance of generativity and stagnation. What is generativity? Generativity, an extension of love into the future. It is a concern for the next generation and all future generations. With this, the individual, like a parent, does not expect to be repaid for the love he gives to his children, at least not as strongly as them. The stagnation, a self-absorption, caring for no one. A stagnant person stops to be a productive member of society. The maladaptation of the stage that the maladaptive tendency Erikson calls it overextension. The person who is overextended no longer contributes as well. This is the stage of the middle crisis and ask question like, what am I doing all this for? The virtue of stage is that if you are successful at this stage, you will have a capacity for carrying that will serve you through the rest of your life. The stage 8. Psychosocial crisis. This stage, referred as late adulthood or maturity or old age, begins sometime around retirement. The task is to develop ego integrity with a minimal amount of despair. In response to this despair, some older people become preoccupied with the past and some become preoccupied with their failures, the bad decisions they made, and regret that they really don't have the time or energy to reverse them. The adaptation of the stage is that the presumption. This is what happens when a person presumes ego integrity without actually facing the difficulties of old age. Malignant tendency is called disdain. Disdain by which Erikson means a contempt of life, one's own or anyone's. The person becomes very negative and appears to hate life. The virtue of this stage 8 is that someone who approaches death without fear has the strength Erikson called wisdom. To sum it up, the Erikson's 8 stages theory is a tremendously powerful model. It is very accessible and obviously relevant to modern life, from several different perspectives for understanding and explaining how personality and behavior develops in people. As such, Erikson's theory is useful for teaching, parenting, self-awareness, managing and coaching, dealing with conflict, and generally for understanding self and others. Various terms I use to describe Erikson model, for example, Erikson's biopsychosocial or biopsychosocial theory refers to biological, which in context means life. All refer to the same age stages psychosocial theory, it being Erikson's most distinct work and remarkable model. The Module 8, the Koberg's theory of moral development. According to Lawrence Koberg, right action tends to be defined in terms of general, individual rights and standards that have been critically examined and agreed upon by the whole society. Individuals, when confronted by situations where they need to make moral decisions, exercise their own ability to use moral reasoning. Lawrence Kohlberg was interested in studying the development of moral reasoning. He based his theory on the findings of Piaget in studying cognitive development. Our ability to choose right from wrong is tied with our ability to understand and reason logically. The Kohlberg theory of moral development. According to Kohlberg, the moral development occurs in six stages. Level 1, pre-conventional level. It is the moral reasoning is based on the consequent result or the act, not on the whether the act itself is good or bad. The description is the punishment and the obedience. One is motivated by fear of punishment. He will act in order to avoid punishment. The level of conventional. Okay. The stage 2 is the mutual benefit. Mutual benefit, one is motivated to act by the benefit that one may obtain later. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. The level of conventional. It's in the stage 3, the social approval. Social approval is one motivated by what others expect and behavior. Good boy, good girl. The person acts because he or she value how she will appear to others. He or she gives importance on what people will think or say. Next is the stage 4, the law and order. Law and order, one is motivated to act in order to uphold law and order. The person will follow the law because it is the law. The stage 5, the social contract. Social contract means that laws that are wrong can be changed. One will act based on social justice and the common good. The post-conventional, the universal principle. This is associated with the development of one's conscience, having a set of standards that drives one to possess moral responsibility to make social changes regardless of consequences to oneself. Example of persons are Mother Teresa, Martin Luther King Jr. Next is the Module 9, Vygotsky's Sociocultural Theory. According to Lev Vygotsky, what a child can do in cooperation today, tomorrow he will be able to do alone. When Vygotsky was a young boy, he was educated under a teacher who used the Socratic method. This method was a systematic question and answer approach that allowed Vygotsky to examine current thinking and practice higher levels of understanding. This experience, together with his interest in literature and his work as a teacher, led him to recognize social interaction and language as two central factors in cognitive development. His theory became known as the socio-cultural theory of development. The Piagets and Vygotsky, there are differences in views about cognitive development. According to Piaget, more individual in focus believe that there are universal stages of cognitive development, but according to Vygotsky, more social in focus did not propose stages but emphasize on cultural factors in cognitive development. According to Piaget, did not give much emphasis on language, but Vygotsky stressed the role of language in cognitive development. The social interaction. Social interaction, cultural factors, language. Social interaction. Piaget's theory was more individual, while Vygotsky was more social. Piaget's work on Piagetian tasks focused heavily on how an individual's cognitive development become evident through the individual's own processing of the task, while Vygotsky, on the other hand, gave more weight on the social interactions that contributed to the cognitive development of individuals. For him, the social environment or the community takes on a major role in one's development. Vygotsky emphasized the effective learning happens through participation in social activities, making the social context of learning crucial. Parents, teachers, and other adults in the learner's environment all contribute to that process. They explain, model, assess, give direction, and provide feedback to the learner. Peers, on the other hand, cooperate and collaborate and enrich the learning experience. The cultural factors. Vygotsky believed that the crucial role that played on the cognitive development of children is the culture. Piaget believed that as a child develops and matures, he goes through universal stages of cognitive development that allows him to move from simple explorations with senses and muscles to complex reasoning. Vygotsky, on the other hand, looked into the wide range of experiences that a culture would give to a child. For instance, one culture's view about education, how children are trained early in life, all can contribute to the cognitive development of the child. Language. Language opens the door for learners to acquire knowledge that others already have. Learners can use language to know and understand the world and solve problems. Language serves a social function, but it also has an important individual function. It helps the learner regulate and reflect on his own thinking. Children talk to themselves, observe preschooler play, and you may hear. Vygotsky believed in the essential role of activities in learning. Children learn best through hands-on activities than when listening passively. Learning by doing is even made more fruitful when children interact with knowledgeable adults and peers. The zone of proximal development. When a child attempts to perform a scale alone, she may not be immediately proficient at it. Zone of actual development, however, with the guidance of more knowledgeable other or KMO, MKO, a competent adult or a more advanced peer, the child can perform at a higher level of competency. The difference between what the child can accomplish alone and what she can accomplish when the child can with the guidance of another is what Vygotsky referred to as zone of proximal development. The zone represents a learning opportunity where a knowledgeable adult such as a teacher or parent or a more advanced peer can assist the child's development. The support or assistance that lets the child accomplish a task he cannot accomplish indefinitely is called scaffolding. Scaffolding is not about doing the task for the child while he watches. It is not about doing shortcuts for the child. Scaffolding should involve the judicious assistance given by the adult or peer so that the child can move from the zone of actual to the zone of proximal development. When MKO scaffolds, the process moves in four levels. Number one, I do, you watch. I do, you help. You do, I help. You do, I watch. Learning well depend on the skill of the MKO and the learner's readiness and ability to learn and the difficulty of the skill being learned. Vygotsky always emphasized the role of cultural factors in cognitive development. He also identified intellectual tools of adaptation which enable individuals to acquire cognitive skills depending on what tools their culture has made available for them. The Module 10, the Bronfenbrenner's ecological theory. According to Yuri Bronfenbrenner, children need people in order to become human. Bronfenbrenner came up with a simple yet useful paradigm showing the different factors that exert influence on individuals' development. It points out the ever-widening spheres of influence that shape every individual, from his/her immediate family to the neighborhood, the country, even the world. The Bronfenbrenner's bioecological model structure of environment. The microecosystem. The microsystem is the layer nearest the child. It comprises structure with the child directly interacts. It includes structures such as one's family, school, and neighborhood. As such, the microsystem covers the most basic relationship and interaction that a child has in his/her immediate environment. The mesosystem. The mesosystem is this layer serves as the connection between the structures of the child's microsystem. For example, the mesosystem will include the link of interaction between the parents and teachers, or the parent and health services, or the community and the church. The microsystem, the exosystem. These layers refers to the bigger social system in which the child does not function directly, includes the city government, the workplace, and the mass media. The child may not interact directly with what is in the ecosystem, but he is likely feel the positive or negative impact the system creates as it interacts with the child's own system. The macrosystem. This layer is found in the outermost part in the child environment. The macrosystem includes the cultural, values, customs, and laws. The belief system contained in one's macrosystem permeates all the interactions in the other. For example, in Western countries like the US, most of young people are expected to be more independent by the time they enter teenage years, while in Asian countries like ours, parents are expected to support or at least want to support their children for a longer period of time. It is not uncommon to see even married children still living with their parents. Because of difference in beliefs and customs, children from different parts of the world experience different child rearing practices and therefore difference in development as well. Next is the chronosystem. The chronosystem covers the elements of time as it relates to a child's environment. This involves patterns of stability and change in the child's life. This involves whether the child's day is characterized by an orderly, predictable pattern or whether the child is subjected to sudden change in routine. As children get older, they may react differently to environmental changes. The children may have also acquired the ability to cope and decide to what extent they will allow the changes around them to affect them. The ecological system theory focuses on the quality and context of the child's environment. Bronfenbrenner pointed out that as a child develops, the interplay within the layers of environment system becomes more complex. This dynamic interaction of the system happens meantime, while the child's physical and cognitive structures also grow and mature. This bioecological theory helps us determine how the different circumstances, conditions, and relationship in the world affect the child as he or she goes through the more or less predictable sequence of natural growth and development. The role of schools and teachers. Schools and teachers' crucial role is not to replace the lack in the home if such exists, but to work so that the school becomes an environment that welcomes and nurtures families. Bronfenbrenner co-founded Head Start, the publicly funded early childhood program in the US. He concluded that The instability and productivity of family life is the most destructive force to a child's development. Researchers tell us that the absence of lack of children's constant mutual interaction with important adults has negative effects on their development. Bronfenbrenner's theory reminds the school and the teachers of their very important role. If there is a lack of support, care, and affection from a home, if there is a serious breakdown of the basic relationship in a child's life, what can the school, the teachers in particular, do? This theory helps teachers look into every child's environmental system in order to understand more about the characteristic and needs of each child, each learner. Schools and teachers can contribute stability and long-term relationship but only to support and not replace the relationship in the home. That's all, and good afternoon. That's all about the theories from Freud's to Bronfenbrenner's theory. And thank you.